Welcome to the WriteHive 2024 panel on introvert or extrovert, how to make your style work. We have here a nice panel of people to discuss this, and I'm really excited to get into it because, as it happens, when I take the Myers-Briggs, I end up as an ambivert. So, my name is Tim. I'll be your host, and let's go ahead and meet everybody else. Vanessa, this way. Vanessa, would you mind telling us, who you are, what you write, and where you fall on that spectrum?
Hello, I'm Vanessa Ricci-Thode, pronouns she, they. I'm from Waterloo, the one near Toronto. Sorry about the accent. I'm an ambivert too. I've done Myers-Briggs twice, and I got introverted once and extroverted once, and it seems to depend on my mood, whether I'm introverted or extroverted, or neither, or both.
And Patricia?
Hi, I'm Patty or Patricia, and I write science fiction and also historical fiction. Do not know what Myers-Briggs would call me, but I am an introvert. I live in Southern California, and I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent. And Salinee?
Hi, I'm Salinee Goldenberg, and my book, The Last Bee Hunter, just came out April. It's Time Spider Dark Fantasy. And I think that I'm probably more of an extrovert. I thought I was more of an introvert, but I do go through phases where I do shut in my cave and never come outside. So it goes back and forth, I'd say.
All right. And Kate, please.
Hi, I'm Kate DeMaio. I write Kidlit. My middle grade novel is coming out in January, and I would say I'm pretty solidly an introvert, but I definitely have moments of floating the line. Like I prefer public speaking for whatever weird reason to like talking with a stranger.
Fair enough. Well, that does bring us to kind of the first issue, which is defining our terms. It sounds like there's some different kind of definitions going on. So let's start with, how do you define this spectrum? How do you define introvert versus extrovert?
I think the definition I've seen a lot is that introverts have to spend a lot of energy to interact with people and need a lot of recharge time, while extroverts kind of gain energy by interacting with people. That was the kind of basic definition I saw. I don't know about others.
I had a spin on that. We were with a friend of ours, an in-law, and she's very extroverted. And after we visited with her, I had the thought that, so I don't know if this is going to resonate with anyone, but I think whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, what you want is to understand the world. And an introvert, in my thinking, an introvert thinks about what they know. And by thinking about what they know, quietly thinking about it, they get to a point where they understand the world better. And for the extrovert, I think they also want to understand the world, but it's by talking to other people and actually saying what's going on in your mind and talking that they process so that they can understand the world a little bit. And so for me, if I'm with an extrovert and they're talking and they're, organizing their thoughts, then now I have to go be quiet so that I can organize what they just told me into what I'm already thinking. So I think it has to do with we all want to understand the world. That's my answer.
Yeah, I think everything I've ever seen about talking about the differences between introverts and extroverts is more along the line what Sal said about your energy and where you get your energy from and how you spend your energy. I've always the introverts I know talk about how when they've been peopling a lot, they need to have a lot of downtime to recharge. And I know that for me, mostly I get my energy from being around people and talking to people, which is why definitely somewhere in the middle, because hanging out by myself, being in my little cave, nice and quiet, that's great. But also I can people for days and days and not need the downtime.
Kate, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've definitely heard the traditional sort of where you get your energy from. But I hear Patty's point as well. I think it does tend to be how you interact with people as well. So if you need to take that time to process, that could be part of being an introvert, or if you're sort of a thinking out loud kind of person, that might be more extroverted.
So I think yeah, so I guess we'll keep an eye out for making sure that we recognize that other people in the panel are using slightly different definitions. I'm going to be phrasing my questions as kind of a neutral way, in that I'm going to describe extroversion as outward focus for getting energy or for getting knowledge, and introversion as inward focused for getting knowledge or getting energy. Which I think kind of straddles that line and allows me to discuss it universally for the sake of the panel. So how does your position in on that spectrum and your view of what that means kind of affect how you go about your writing process? Does it affect the specific writing process, or is it more of a other phases of writing type of thing?
That one's interesting. I've never really thought about my personality type and how it would affect my writing process. I'm not sure that it affects so much when I am writing, maybe where or how. Um, when I'm feeling more introverted, I definitely want to be at home by myself in a room alone working on it. When I'm feeling a little lonely, I like to go to a cafe with friends or the library or wherever and write as a group where we can chat a little bit in between sprints. So that definitely depends, and I'm not too sure what it's like for people who are on like farther ends of the spectrum than me, kind of sitting in the middle.
Yeah, I think I definitely prefer to write in a quiet space. I don't know if that's necessarily an introvert thing, but I just am better without the background noise. But I do find it's easier, I think, for me to slip away from, you know, a vacation, or take some time to myself to go write, as opposed to being like I have to go hang out with someone. But I do think it is an interesting point of view, to where if you are writing in a cafe or with a group of people, maybe you're getting some more inspiration from things that are happening around you.
Yeah, I find like I can get a lot of energy by just going out and even walking around or riding. I like to write, or I like to draft on the train a lot and just kind of ride it aimlessly and sort of become inspired by things around me, or just kind of feeling like I'm in motion and something's going on. Sometimes I'll get too stuck with them, just sitting, you know, on the couch with my cats, which is awesome too. I like that a lot. But like the drafting, being in motion kind of helps me a lot. So I think you know, getting into random conversations in the park with people, or like uh just kind of looking outside and seeing a place to like stop, you know, that you've never been before, jumping off and walking around like that. That might be an extroverted thing. I don't know. Maybe it sounds like a nightmare to the introverts on here. So maybe but I think that's one of the things that I've noticed in my process, as well as like looking for a writing group that we meet together and like kind of go over our works and stuff like that. I enjoy kind of like sharing and like giving feedback and being part of that kind of group too.
It's an interesting question, because I think an extreme introvert, like someone who was so introverted they had trouble leaving the house, would probably have difficulty sharing their work. And that would probably make it hard for them to improve in their work if they never get that outside. Maybe not. I think that for me, because I'm introverted, but you know, it's interesting because when I was younger, I used to do this, I used to be in community theater and I loved being on stage. But if you've ever done community theater, it's kind of like there is that fourth wall there. So you kind of feel like you're in a privileged space, even though you're in front of an audience. So it's just interesting to think about, you know, how we are and how we interact with other people. But because I think that I like thinking about the world privately and in the quiet of my head, like I like thinking about the real world that way. It lends itself also to writing stories because I can think about that fictional world in my head and I can just be there trying to piece it out, piece it together. So I feel like introversion works well for me as I'm writing. And I think I would have trouble writing as much if I slid closer to an extrovert because I'd be out with people all the time and not able to write so much.
Yeah, so a lot of the answers given there touched on other parts of the writing process, but seem to focus on the actual act of writing. Let's explore some other aspects like inspiration or thinking through how things are going to work. Like how outwardly versus inwardly focused is that process for you, and how do you find a comfortable place for that?
I'm going to jump in again because I love that question too. I love all the questions. They're such great prompts. And I would say that the strongest parts of my drafts are those parts where I am outwardly focused. I wouldn't say I'm interacting with people, but I would say that I'm really focused on either like people watching and figuring out how do people actually talk in conversation. And it's not at all like the dialogue that you might just come up with off the top of your head. So it's like, oh, that's what actual, like people watching is fantastic. So that's outward focus. And it's the same thing with setting. Like if you're stuck on setting and you can't get a detail, actually, staring at whatever it is, staring at the thing you're trying to describe, you can outward focus like that and then get the detail that makes it pop. Yeah, I'm gonna be quiet.
You don't ever have to feel the need to be quiet. Like these prompts are meant to be encouraging discussion and not necessarily you answering me. Just but feel free to explore the topic.
I think it could also maybe being a little more extroverted, it would be easier when it comes to doing research. Like you'd feel less shy about reaching out to strangers to ask, someone who's, an expert on like sword fighting or bugs or whatever, you find someone online and you have to send that like DM. And I think you can kind of get really in your head as an introvert, like, oh God, they're going to think I'm crazy or whatever, or block me. But whereas an extrovert probably be like, oh, hey, just send it. So that was one thing I thought of as far as like the differences maybe.
I think when I'm writing, there's like moments where I try to get in the character's head and sort of, and I'm like, what would they do at this point? And I'll even at some point be like, okay, if they did this action, what would that look like? And I might like act it out. So I think things like that would just make me not be able to write in public. But yeah, I wonder if it depends a little bit what you're writing or your genre and sort of what your focus is. If you're trying to get into a world building mode, maybe it's easier to be at a museum or something, but I find I can picture things pretty well in my head. I know that's not the case for everybody, but I do kind of like see my scenes as I'm writing them, and I think that's easier to do in my own space.
Yeah, I think that in terms of setting and world building, the extroverted side of me comes in handy because I will go out into the world more readily, interact with people, see the scene. Whereas when it's time to sit quietly and put it all together, that the two things play off of each other so that, yeah, the quiet time helps to process all of the things that I experienced while I was out being loud.
So moving back into the active writing space, do you do events like NaNoWriMo or things like that? And if so, how or engage in like writing events or writing communities? And if so, how do you kind of approach those and give yourself the engagement and the space that you need?
Okay, so I won't get into NaNoWriMo drama, but I was the ML for my region for well over a decade. I quit last year because of the drama. I saw it coming. I still do NaNoWriMo type things outside of it now. So I do a lot of organizing and doing the events and participating in them and organizing them. And I love that, which is how I know I'm not strictly an introvert. But those things are so valuable to me. I just loved it when I discovered NaNoWriMo and then my local writing community through that. I've made so many good friends, and it's helped me develop my craft as a writer because I can bounce ideas off of other writers. We grow together learning things. I have my critique groups through the local community. So it's been very valuable for me to participate in those sorts of things. And in fact, I've sort of become a binge writer, and I mostly only write during November. I write a lot during November, but and then I spend the rest of the year workshopping what I've worked on, or editing, or doing my outlining. So yeah, I get right in there when it comes time for events and getting into things in person. NaNoWriMo actually taught me how to work in really loud environments, which came in handy when I became a parent because children are not quiet. So learning to write in a loud cafe with people having conversations around me and sometimes over me when the writers around me were talking to each other about, oh, this character, how do I fix this? Or, I'm stuck on this world building, and people are bouncing ideas off of each other, and I'm just like head down writing through it all, which was a really valuable skill to have, and I'm really glad that I've cultivated it. So yeah, I really value that sort of thing.
That also raises another thought that hadn't occurred to me, which is that so I think we all have friends. I assume we all have friends who are writers. And then I assume we all know people who are readers. And then we all know other people too, who are family or whatever. If I'm with a group of writers, the conversations are usually writing related. And that's like a totally different energy than getting together with family over Thanksgiving dinner, where, the conversation goes 1,000 different ways and it's incredibly draining because you have to remember not to offend anybody and whatever. If you're with like a group of writers, some of whom are very good friends within the idea of writing, like Vanessa's saying, you can, talk about characters and whether this is a character trait or whether this is part of their stakes in this scene, or whether, what is their motivation for this, or what is their agency. And the other writer is going to understand what you're talking about and where you're coming from and why this is a problem you're working on. And like your cousin has no clue what you're talking about because they're not a writer. So that's interesting, because it means there are groups of people that I love interacting with if it's really defined like that. And that's my answer. And I don't know how that gets into writing, because that's more the socializing than the writing.
Well, I agree. I think community is just so valuable, and maybe it's a different kind of energy that writers generate that transcends intro and extroversion, but I totally can relate to that. I don't feel as tired as if I was shopping with like two of my other like really high strung friends or something, just sitting with some buddies talking about the books we read, or our latest problems in our plot, or what have you.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps to have people to bounce ideas off of. So I'm in one critique group that we've been meeting monthly for like 3 or 4 years now. And so you really get to know them and their characters, and some of them are working on their second books of the series, and you're really like invested in the character growth and everything. So it's easier to have that conversation, I would say, than I guess talking to strangers for me.
Let's pivot away from that for a minute. How early do you start sharing information on works that you're doing, and how do you go about doing that? Like, how broadly do you share it? How early do you share it? Just kind of that general thing. And how do you think that your introversion versus extroversion affects that process for you?
I will share the idea fairly early in the process. I'm an outliner, so I usually know everything that's going to happen in the story before I start drafting. But once I get the idea or I have the character, I will start chatting with my writer friends about it, like to sort of bounce the idea off of them. So right at the idea stage, I will start sharing a little bit. outside of writers groups, I won't share anything that's not polished. So even if it's something that's not out, if it's just like a brief, just an excerpt, I want to go through it and make sure that it's as polished as it can be before I'm going to share it with non-writers. I think possibly because writers understand more, all the little errors that happen in your writing before you do get it polished. So that's definitely different. And I don't know, how introversion, extroversion would affect that. Possibly a little bit. I am sort of outgoing and not not really that reserved about that sort of thing, but it's also, I've been writing a really long time, so it could just be that I've just gotten more comfortable with my writing and my process, and trusting that the writing friends that I've had, I've known a lot of them for more than 10 years. So there's a lot of trust involved in the sharing, I think, which comes from a different place than just, am I an introvert or an extrovert?
Yeah, I have like my alpha reader, my best friend, and we've actually written together a lot too. So she sees everything in like real time, even if I'm just coming up with random ideas on what I want to write, to like, just brain dumping stuff. We kind of share that way. So I just have one big outlet for that stuff. And then similar to what Vanessa was saying, I have a writing group that I've been with for several years, and then I'll share like finished works with them when I'm at like beta reader stage. Sometimes maybe a chapter or two, like, hey, this person I know is good at this kind of genre. Look at this chapter. Tell me if I'm insane, if I'm missing something, like what's going on here, So there's like different like circles of when it happens. And I think it helps to, I mean, I guess I don't know if this is an intro or extrovert question or thing, but like being able to like receive critique and take it, I think has a lot to do with like what you were saying, like trust and stuff, and being comfortable within a group. And I think it can take a while to find a crew that you feel comfortable with, because I've heard some pretty big horror stories about people's writing groups, and some online groups too can just, you like might not know who you've been dealing with for years. So it's really hard to find a group. So I'm really like lucky to have found one I really like, and I just recommend, if you still haven't found one, anyone who's listening, keep looking. They're out there for you.
I think that like maybe part of being an introvert is trying to I'm like pretty careful about what groups I do join. So because I don't want to be that person that's like, okay, bye. I'm like not in this group anymore. So I do kind of like have a slow ramp up of sort of, okay, now I'm in this group, and then like slowly contributing more as we get to know each other more. And as far as sharing my work, I do sort of wait until I have a first draft of a book done. It doesn't always work out that way, but I think I try to make sure that I'm more of a pantser, so I at least have, something finished, so I know the book is going somewhere before I share it.
Yeah, I think I'm right in that same Venn diagram. It's like not the first draft for me usually, and maybe parts in the second draft. Like I'm on my second draft now in my current project and starting to share a little bit of it, but being very cautious about who I share it with, because if the wrong person gives me the wrong feedback on the wrong day, it's going to derail me, and I'm going to second guess everything and feel unsure about myself. And I know that about myself, like I know that, so I know how to safeguard against it. So it's just being cautious and knowing who to trust. But I would agree that early on, it might not be an introversion and extroversion thing. It might not be. I really like what Kate said, because I think that pretty much, ties it together to introversion and extroversion. But I think when I was very new to writing, for the first couple of years, I had no clue what I was doing because my background's in science. And so I was like, I would spit something out and say, hey, is this a story? And people would look at me like, you really don't know what a character is, do you? And I'd be like, no, I really don't. So, so I would spit stuff out more quickly then. And now I'm like, yeah, I kind of know what I'm doing. I'm going to take a while before I show people.
So one of the things that came up a lot in that was about trust. It sounded like a lot of this was about trust. So how do you seek out writing communities, and then how do you build that trust with those communities?
Sometimes it's just easier to identify places where, like, trust, if you feel a red flag, just trust it. That's where I would start. And yeah, which is sort of the opposite of what you're asking.
I think part of the reason for me that my one critique group has been so successful is because we meet over Zoom, and I just feel like it's a lot easier to read people and to take in a critique, because I find that usually they're not trying to be mean. They're just trying to share their opinions on it. So I think having some sort of face-to-face time makes it a little bit easier than chatting online.
Yeah, I have gathered a lot of groups in a lot of different ways, and it started with NaNoWriMo forums and just chatting with people online, and that was definitely a lot more difficult. And I really appreciated the in-person aspect of it, because you get to know the people so much better. As you said, you can read them. And with the pandemic and so many virtual things happening, and Zoom becoming more of a thing, and Discord, Zoom video calls being more of a thing, I found that really expanded how I interact with other writers, because it's so much more open. It's not just my local writing group now. I have, writer friends all around the world who I interact with, mostly through Discord servers like the WriteHive one. But there are people that I have met at virtual events, where you can talk and you can chat and you can sort of read people's expression, and you can sort of get a feel for people to learn about them and earn that trust, see if there's any red flags that maybe, this isn't going to be a space that's good for me. I guess it's reading the vibes, and it's easier to do when, you can see faces.
Yeah, I found my writing group in DC on Meetup, actually. So I think and I remember maybe going to a few of the NaNoWriMo like write-ins years ago too. And it was a in-person group at first only until COVID, and then we kind of went hybrid. But I just really enjoy having that like face-to-face time with people. I think you can, like you were saying, get like a feel of the vibe, and I went to a couple other in-person groups too. Some of them I just kind of like never went back if I wasn't feeling it. I think it's okay to just kind of, know what's working for you and what isn't. But yeah, it takes a while to like build trust with people. I think some people can just go out and throw you all the stuff like, right off the bat, but I always have to kind of lurk for a while before I can like start slipping my work in.
All right, so let's talk about burnout a little bit, so that we have plenty of time afterwards to talk about happier things. So how do you kind of maintain your energy and avoid burnout, or once you fall into it, how do you get out of burnout? How do you kind of approach that whole mess that burnout is?
Okay, so I am still working my way out of burnout. It started with the pandemic and the lockdowns, because I am not fully introverted, and I went from doing social things 4 or 5 times a week to 0 times a week. And even with some virtual things that I had, it was like, sometimes a once a week thing. And it was very difficult. My mental health went for 2 years, 2 straight years, I couldn't write. I could barely function. And the writing took the biggest hit. I was still fairly creative in other areas. I could paint, I'm still gardening, but the words just weren't coming. The more you force the words, the worse you make it. So, you know, rest, you need quiet. And I'm like, but I want people, but I can't see people because lockdown. So it was just really tough. And the only way out is through, and just being gentle with myself and just not forcing the words, just waiting for the words to be ready again. And it's been hard setting realistic goals because I used to write a lot, and now I'm writing maybe at a 10th of the speed I used to. So there's a lot of readjusting expectations involved if you want to get yourself through burnout, and just being very gentle with yourself, which if you're an extrovert can be hard because you get that energy from people, but like the energy that goes into arranging a get together with people can be too much. So I think that burnout can be tougher possibly for people who are more extroverted. And so it's just sort of feeling your way through, because burnout's also different for everybody, how it affects you, how it affects your writing. Some people get really burnt out and they can't do anything else, but they can still write. For me, I couldn't do much of anything, but especially I couldn't write. But just taking care, I think, is the biggest thing, and knowing what care looks like for you, because it's so individual.
Like for me, the burnout that I have experienced has been more if I've fallen into like a habit of checking social media too often. So definitely sort of opposite. I was like pretty successful at writing during the pandemic, is like what I did in my free time. But I think, yeah, if I get in too many groups, there's too many people messaging, I'm just like, there's too many contests going on and things that I need to be doing, and I can't do it all. And then I just sort of shut down, and I need to step offline for a second and give myself some time to take away from that.
I'm not sure, Tim. Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that like, I wonder if there's a difference for extroverts and introverts and ambiverts. And I consider myself an introvert who can push myself into extroversion if I need to. But I'm curious, Tim, you said you're an ambivert. So I'm curious if you have an answer to the question. And I would say that I don't suffer from much burnout, but if I do, like if I get writer's block, which is a little different, if I just feel like I can't write, I would be more likely to call that writer's block. And I still don't get it very often, but I deal with it by reading. I go back to my favorite books and read. And I go out for a hike. I go hike for 6 hours. And then just because my physiology is like, whatever is, I've given myself a kick in the pants. It does something to help me sit back down again and start typing words. But if you're an ambivert, I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to toss this over to you, but how would you answer the question?
I don't know if I'm allowed to answer things. But well, I guess I can do whatever I want. They'll just edit it out if I'm
Yeah, they can edit it out.
But I maintain a belief that nothing in nature produces all year round. And so I don't tend to think of like those early signs of like that burnout's coming or whatever. I don't push through them. I just, okay, I need to stop. And so I stop. And so then if I don't write for a few months, then I just don't write for a few months. And I have a number of different kind of creative outlets that I pursue. So I just switch to a different one. And that mostly works for me.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I do like either music or art or something like that. Just to, and a lot of times I try to like kind of relate it to writing. I kind of like trick myself, like, oh, I'm just gonna watch all these shows. It's like kind of in the genre of what I want to write. That's research, right? So I try to like reward my brain, like, you're still working on it, just in a different way,
You did mention one of you mentioned that burnout might not look the same for, I think it might have been a couple people, might not look the same for everyone. How does burnout kind of affect you? And do you think it's related to your introversion or extroversion, or do you think it's just a personality, a different type of personality thing?
For me, I have mental health issues as well. I get depressed. I have seasonal affective disorder, so I get super depressed, stop functioning in the winter. And burnout looks the same, but is much worse. And it, because, you know, the depression affects everything, but the burnout was very specifically affecting my writing. I don't even want to open the document. Like a lot of the times, you know, when it's just writer's block or whatever, you go for a walk, whatever, you can sit at the keyboard and you can stare at it for a little while and you can get a few words out. I couldn't even do that. Nothing was working, you know, going for a walk wasn't, touching grass wasn't working. Consuming my favorite books wasn't working. Nothing was working. So it started to look very different. And I started to realize, no, this isn't just me being depressed. You know, this isn't just my, you know, understandable reaction to world events. This is something else. And so I think it's again, it's knowing yourself and knowing how you react to certain things and what different things look like. And I don't think it had to do with me being an ambivert, essentially. Although, you know, being social and not being able to socialize anymore did contribute to it. It was ultimately, you know, we were back in the world again and I still couldn't write. And it took a long time for that to come back. And it does, you know, it mirrored the depression a little bit, but it was still, it had this different component to it that there was no working through it. And from what I've talked to, like other people I've heard talking about their burnout, like they're really serious, not just writer's block or whatever. It's like, it was writer's block for 2 years. And there was just nothing I could do except consume art and, you know, take care of myself and rest until suddenly I got excited about writing again. And that was how I knew I was finally getting through it, because I wasn't even excited to write. I didn't care. I was like, I used to love these characters. I don't want to do this. I don't care. So once I got through that and was like, oh yes, this idea is amazing. I can't wait to write this. That was when the switch flipped and it was like, okay, I'm getting to the other side of this.
There are times that I'm excited, like I wake up and I can't wait to write. And I don't know that I get burnout, but definitely I have times when I can't wait to write. And I think it is the characters that pull me into it. Like I'm excited to see what they're going to do. And I can't wait. I go make my coffee and I go sit down and they do stuff and it's cool. And then there are people that I interact with. And I think I had some of this too, when I was querying my first manuscript, that you're excited, you've created this thing and it's beautiful and you love it. And you have your, you know, your beta readers or whoever who are cheering you on. And then you query it and the agents are all like, yeah, nah. And you get rejection. And I think that's a kind of burnout as well. Because why did I just spend 2 years of my life or whatever it was on this thing? You know, so again, that wouldn't be introvert or extrovert. That would just be like, you know, part of the whole business. And knowing yourself, I think, is a great answer, how to make it through those times.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about different times I've been burned out. It feels like every episode has probably looked a little bit different depending on what was going on, whether it was like that whole Quarry Trenches slog or this whole publishing journey and just having the debut coming out last month. I feel almost like I am on like kind of a mini burnout. Like I'm so tired of this book. And I shouldn't say it. I mean, I love this book. This book is great. Please buy it. But I'm, you know, just writing all the like marketing promo stuff. And I mean, it was kind of fun. But I don't know. And then the book comes out. This is probably a completely different subject topic panel. So I will stop myself. But as far as what it looks like, it is I find myself procrastinating a lot by looking on like dumb social media way longer than I ever should. I have like the app blocker, you know, to stop myself. But the truth is, I'm like, I just don't want to get up and go write. I'd rather just look at, you know, whatever TikTok for like 5 more hours in bed, but maybe I'm depressed, I'm not sure. So that's kind of where I am now.
I wonder
Getting
if
better, getting better.
I wonder if burnout affects people, introverts or extroverts, differently depending on where they are in their process. Like you were just mentioning marketing, and I feel like I'm getting to the point of like, okay, I need to start marketing my book and posting more and trying to get people interested, maybe talking to booksellers and things like that. I'm like, that's the least favorite part of this. I'm like, I'd rather just write the next one or whatever other ideas I have in my head. And yeah, I wonder if like something like editing might be more difficult for an extrovert or something, since that's sort of more in your head focus time.
I really hate editing. And actually I have been doing that for like the next project I have. I feel like I've been editing books for like 2 years. Like I want to write something new so bad. Oh my God, this sounds like it's about to turn into a therapy session. I'm sorry. Struck a nerve suddenly. But you know, like I don't know. I don't know about revision being an extrovert thing. It would be like a pantser thing. Or like, you know, what is it called when you're a pantser / plotter?
Lancer.
Lancer?
Lancer.
Yeah, I love editing, and I think it's exactly because of the introversion, and marketing is the worst and drafting is in between the two. I really like editing. I feel like it's my excuse to like escape the world if I need to, because I have to go edit I have to go edit this chapter. I'm sorry. And yeah.
It's funny, I love the entire process from the idea stage to the planning, you know, the character sheets, all of that, the drafting, the revision. I love it all. And then you get to marketing and my soul leaves my body.
I kind of like it, but then I don't know. It's a very love-hate thing, you know.
So, okay, this speaks to my extrovert part of me. When it comes to marketing, is that I found in-person things. I love doing in-person things with my books. Love them. I have given up on online marketing and I'm doing like 25 in-person events this year.
That's a lot. So many.
Yeah, I started out with 3 to 5 over the course of a year, and it was so draining. And I did 1 this year, and I'm like, that's it, 1, that's it. So it's definitely for me, like not where I want to be putting my energy is at these tabling things and talking to people. But you must feel like you're pulling on your extroversion when you do that, Vanessa. Is that true?
Yes, definitely. The in-person stuff is so good. I love it. And again, this is how I can tell I'm not strictly an introvert, because you know all the introvert writers that I know are just so horrified when I tell them how many events I'm doing. I don't know, probably 12 last summer. I loved them, which is why I'm doing more this summer. And like talking on panels like this, I love this. I want to do more of this. I don't want to fiddle with Amazon ads. Forget that. Yeah, so I'm doing more in-person stuff and I love talking to readers. Even, you know, they're strangers, that's fine, which is, you know, I'm not an introvert, you can tell now. And a lot of people are like, oh, I should do more of that. And I say, oh, do you like talking to people though? Because you really have to be okay with talking to people for hours. And you'll have the same conversations over and over because they're asking you about your books. So I can see how it gets very, very exhausting for an introvert. And some of the authors locally who I know who do these things with me, they'll do one a month at most through the summer, or maybe 1 or 2 a year. And they're like, you know, I need the rest of the year to recharge. And I understand that. But for me, I am having so much fun with these.
Do you find like, I was thinking about it, like, okay, I'm kind of more extroverted, but I do an event, and if it doesn't turn out the way I want, I get really bummed, you know, and I feel like if I was more introverted, I'd be like, whatever, those people are idiots, you know. But like I'm like, oh, I want the attention, you know, I want that positive like feedback. But if no one cares, you know, at whatever it is, I get like real sad. So I don't know if that's something you experience too.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, if I go to, I go out and I put out so much. I mean, it is a lot of work. I like it, but it is a lot of work. And so doing these things and these in-person things, and if it doesn't go well and nobody talks to me and I don't sell any books, I'm like, I quit. Just flip the table and done. So yeah, it does help when it goes well. And I get to chat with lots of people, and it's great. I meet lots of new people because I do them locally. So I'm meeting potential friends, I guess, with a lot of these things and just making connections in the community, which is great. But yeah, great for me, exhausting for lots of other people.
I think that there is an interesting intersection that I think we're starting to brush up against here between kind of where you fall in introversion and extroversion and engaging with your audience. And I know that like I see some interesting things there. Like Patty, I know you rely a lot on science, so there's a lot of probably engagement with that. And so there's probably a certain way that that interaction happens because you're an introvert. And I'm curious, Kate, writing middle grade, it's gonna be a lot of children that are very loud and very, demanding a certain amount of attention. And your introversion, I'm sure, shapes how you engage with that. And so I'm just curious, how does kind of where you are for each of you on the introvert and extrovert spectrum, and with the particular audience that you have, the particular target audience that you have, how do those things mesh, or do you think that they inform each other in any way?
Well, I do feel like I can do in-person events up to a point. So I'm also actually a scientist, and so I've done some we had like a science night at one of the elementary schools that I volunteered for and taught kids how to extract DNA from strawberries. And it was super fun. And I went home like actually energized. But I think there's also events where you get to the certain hour and you're like, okay, I'm done now. I have to leave. So it does depend on the audience and how excited they are. And I guess just even strictly like a certain length of time that I can be that extrovert for a moment.
Yeah, I think that so the one library event that I'm going to do this year, it's over and done. It was a couple of weeks ago. Someone did ask me about like the science, and it was wild. It was as soon as we were talking about the science, I was like, oh, this is awesome. We're going to talk about science now. I think because it's something that interests me in the way that now with my writing friends talking about character arcs and 3-act structures and stuff interests me. So I think that you're right. There is an intersection. As an introvert, I would say that if you're in a little sphere where you enjoy the topic, then that's enough to sort of energize you through the interaction. But I don't dislike people. I like people a lot.
Yeah, I think like my kind of audience or whatever you'd find at the like kind of fantasy nerdy conventions and that kind of thing, like ideally I'd be walking around and seeing people in cosplay of my characters. That's what I want, the like the anime crowd, I think would enjoy this kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of really loud people in that demographic too, like that I get along with. I don't know if that was the answer to the question. I was just imagining what this place looked like.
It's definitely easier to do in-person events or any kind of event, even online ones, where I'm just chatting with people when it's a topic I'm really excited about. And obviously I'm really excited about my books. So that is really easy to talk to. It does get difficult because I write fantasy and I'm at like just a general event. I do a lot of craft markets where there's like, people with crochet stuff and soap and things like that. And then there's me with my books, and people be like, oh, you write fantasy, is it for kids? And I do have one book that just came out that, yes, is a middle grade book. It is for kids, but no, most of my books are for adults. And so you get that sort of thing. And then you get the, the genre snobs, oh, fantasy. I don't love that part of it, but in general, when people are just like, oh, you're an author, and because I do local events, they're like, you're a local author. That's even more magical somehow. So it's just really energizing because people are excited about the books and I'm excited to talk to them about the books. So it ends up being a lot of fun.
Yeah, you can hear them or not. But so we're getting kind of near the hour mark on my clock, by my clock anyway. So let's just kind of focus in on introverts or partial introverts. What are some just kind of general best practices that you have for, keeping yourself going through the writing process and keeping yourself focused and energized and healthy and well, and kind of dealing with the whole process? Just general best practices for introverts.
I guess I can jump in just to say I'm going to repeat what Vanessa said earlier in the burnout question, which is to know yourself. And I think introverts tend to know themselves pretty well. So know your boundaries and just respect them, because you know what happens when you don't.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just I need to limit my social media, and then hopefully I can read, and that will inspire me to continue writing. Just knowing my limits.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to understand that your limits change, which is something that I needed to learn with my burnout, was that no, you can't write that many words a day anymore. Or no, you can't write every day. And just, know what your limits are, but keep track of them because they might change.
Awesome. And then just kind of the same question for people who lean extrovert. What are some general best practices and approaches that you have to suggest for people?
For me, I think it'd be to remember not to like spread yourself too thin. Don't say yes to everything. Like, reject FOMO. I think it's okay to miss out on things. It might even be better, makes you more mysterious. You don't have to be at everything. And then I think it's the same thing with what Kate was saying about, recognize when you're like distracting yourself, or for me, like, to limit my, online time by a lot, and realize when I'm, trying to like just look for attention and validation on social media, like, someone please notice me. It's like, no, just go like hang out with your cats for a while. So yeah, rest, know yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah. And with all the social stuff, I need to be better at this sometimes, is leaving time for writing. It can't all be, out and hanging out with people and doing events and stuff. You do need to save that time to actually sit down and write.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Let's go ahead and one more round of introductions. Kind of remind people your name and what you write, and let us know where we can find you. Let's start with Vanessa again.
Hello, yes. So Vanessa Ricci-Thode. I write fantasy mostly for adults and one children's book, mostly with dragons. If you like How to Train Your Dragon, my books are for you. You can find me online at my website, which is just thodestool.ca, or I am on Instagram and Blue Sky at vricci-thode.
And Patty?
Yeah, I'm my handle everywhere is PL Tavormina, and I write science fiction for adults. It's got climate themes, and it's a mash. You can think of it as Little House on the Prairie meets the X-Men. I'm not on social media as much as I used to, but pltavormina.com is a good way to reach me, and I don't have any intention that website will always be there. So thank you for coming to the thing today, anybody who's listening.
Salinee? You're muted.
Totally did that. Okay. Salinee Goldenberg at salgowrites.com is my website. The Last Fee Hunter is my debut novel. It just came out last month. And I have like Instagram, Go Salgo, Twitter, Salgo, just send me a message, tell me to stop looking at Twitter or Instagram.
And finally, Kate.
My name is Kate DeMaio. I write Kidlit. My middle grade novel, Fiona and the Forgotten Piano, is debuting in January 2025. And I'm mostly on Instagram at Kate DeMaio Writes.
Awesome. I've been your host, Tim McLaughlin. If you want to look me up, it's T.E. McLaughlin, spelled just like that, .weebly.com. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of WriteHive 2024. And we hope you have a great day.
Bye.